Hello everybody, this is Mario the Artisan Rogue. No joke, this is kind of a trip coming back to do the voiceover for this. So long story short, the footage you're going to be watching is me creating a bunch of Topsy figures, 10 of them. Technically a few more, but 10 that were sent for Patreon for ICWXP, Rick Wolf's whole creative effort. And it was a lot of fun. I learned so much in this. So you guys are going to see some kind of repetitive clips, but these are the clips that I had left over. So much of the audio was completely wiped out, and these are the few files that I was lucky enough to be able to salvage and put together for this. A few of them may be taken in the wrong sort of order. I did my best trying to compile them back together and put them together. I remember that there were certain things I was doing, like here I'm disassembling them, starting to take the parts, all apart in here. There were white and gray and a few other colored cartridges, the base colors of them, what they were injection molded as. The overall aspect that I had with this was, first of all, I had to check out I knew that SquidKids Ink, who's the gentleman that does this, he's an incredible artist. He does great work with this. He releases these. I first found out that what he did because of the fact that he would sell limited edition versions, limited releases that were already pre-colored, pre-done up, but he sold these blank ones in boxes. And I don't remember if it was Rick that reached out to me or if I reached out to him, and we worked out this whole thing where I was going to do a couple of these to kind of give something extra for people who were on the Patreon to have something more. As far as a reward tier. I don't actually remember how it all ended up or who got them or anything else like that. Whenever I was putting these together, I ran across so many issues on this. There were a lot of times where I was fighting. If the weather was sunny, it was blisteringly hot and humid. If it was not that, it was rainy. So it was a mixed bag the entire way. I fought with the paint. I used a Montana white for the base coat, and I normally stick with Montana or some of the higher end paints, but you'll see here this orange hand, that's done with Rust-Oleum. It was a particular color of orange that I wanted, and I found it at Ace Hardware, and I bought it on a lark. It was on clearance of all things. I thought, well, this is almost too perfect. And it turned out to be just perfect. Had a nice semi-gloss application. When it went on, it was really nice. I've always used spray paint on a bunch of different things, whether it's working with miniatures or doing other stuff. I've always managed to make, projects work out for me where I can utilize spray paint. It's just faster. I like it. It's akin to working with watercolor, where that can spread, across a paper, a substrate, and fill in a lot of color quickly. It's also why I love working in digital so much. So here I was testing a lot of the tolerances. One of the things I hadn't taken into consideration was the overspray and what the paint was going to be doing to a bunch of things like the contact points where screws were going in, the edges that may need a little bit more paint application, stuff like that. But what was happening was, because it was taking 2 or 3 coats to get on there and then some sanding, the tolerances weren't going to allow these things to close back down like they should have. And right here, I remember this distinctly. I was having a hell of a time getting this thing to close. And I remember I started freaking out a little bit here. Now, this may have been one of the videos that I sent in for review, or no, this wasn't. I wasn't about to send this one in. This was one where I was doing it for my own records. And I know I surely was saying something profound out loud right there. Probably cuss words. And so then I did end up getting them all sanded, and they started snapping back together. So this was the first initial trial run to get them snapped back together. The hardware is not back in because I didn't want to paint over that. I was taking every precaution I could because I knew, considering what the weather was like and how the taping might go, I would probably end up having to fix quite a few of them. Now, you can see that from the lighting on here, there's some texture on that paint. That was not the plan at all. And that was definitely the struggle that it haunts me. It's weird. I don't know how many of you do this, like keep video records or pictures, or even just look back at your old artwork and you go, yeah, coulda, woulda, shoulda done that. But I didn't. And it's weird because now, just a few years later, because this was 2018, so about 4 or 5 years ago. Really, am I doing? Fuck, I suck at math. No, that's right. Yeah, that's right. When just looking at this right now, there's just some things I'm very critical of myself on, and I'm don't get me wrong, I'm happy with how they turned out, and if Rick was happy, I was happy, and that's ultimately where I was at. But there's just so many things looking at this now. I'm like, why didn't I put something else in those holes to prevent any overspray from getting in there? Why didn't I use lighter application? Why didn't I, set up something else in the garage and then work in there and put a dehumidifier to control a lot of things? But this is all stuff you end up learning as you go along. Oh, look at my workbench. I didn't have that much shit on there at the time. Yeah, it looks cluttered, but you wouldn't believe what the hell that thing looks like now. Okay, so I love this color red, and I have used it on multiple projects. But this particular guy gave me hell. For some reason, when I went out there, I thought it was going to be dry enough, but that humidity gummed up everything. The tape, look at that. Look at how thick that is. You can physically see how that's just cutting through that paint as it's pulling up, which it's supposed to do. But it felt like molasses when I was pulling it up. It was a very, very weird thing. And every single step of it, I'm like, am I going to rip extra red off that I don't want? And the edges were really rough on it. What killed me was 2 or 3 of them ended up like this, and then the rest really came together well. Part of it was I had to step back on how much paint I was applying, on, just controlling the wind overspray, a bunch of things. I ended up building this spray box out of cardboard to control how the wind was whipping around things and how the humidity was setting on things. But it was still a challenge. There was just so much that I learned out of this. And already at this point, I'm trying to make decisions on whether or not I'm going to add yellow onto that detail that's on the right-hand side, on the upper part on here now. And I was thinking to myself, already, what color yellow? And I just happened to notice in front of me Jesus, I'm forgetting that word, but basically it's that ruler that's on the wall over there that has balances in it, and or levels. Balances, what the fuck am I talking about? You can tell I'm doing this voiceover fuck, it's 4:52 in the morning. Oh God, I gotta start sleeping better. I so many questions about my life. Anyway, this isn't a therapy session. Let me get back to what the fuck I'm talking about. So here, I'm just painting up the hands. It's pretty obvious, right? And I ended up buying a bunch of these other liquid paints. I was masking them off, but then I found, you know what? Nothing beats just going in and painting everything by hand. Again, here, I overestimated the amount of thickness that the paint was going to add on to the tips that go into the body. So those orange pegs, the ends of them sticking out, that's what slides into the body. But every little bit, the tolerances are so tight on those arms and those feet on those figures that adding any amount of paint in there was just crazy, trying to get them back in there. So then I found myself scraping paint off in the end. There's just so many aspects of this project. I'm like, oh my God. Here, I really should have just filled in the entire bottom of the feet with gray paint and I would have been fine. There wouldn't have been any issue there. Jesus, it's so weird too, because in 5 years, the studio doesn't even look like this now. That's still my drawing table, but now it's permanently set to be standing up. The light table there in the far back isn't there. But here you guys can see the master, the original one that I did. Now he is about 50% bigger than them. And I still have that one. But that was the original concept that I had, where I was like, oh, I'll do these. And then cost prohibitive, was prohibitive to do them that size. I would have loved to have done that, but this made more sense, and for shipping and all these other things. I didn't really know how this project was going to go, and I thought, no, the smaller ones will be easier. But I did end up spending a lot of time doing handwork on them. It's also crazy, too. That thing in the center is a spray table, and it spins. It's, I think, by the modeling company Cameo, and I love it. I fell in love with that thing. I use it now for so much stuff, but I really should have cleaned that red off. It was so gummy. It just stuck to that thing, and later I ended up having to go back and clean it up. I never did get it back to its original black color, but I had to scrape all that stuff off just to get anything else on there, because anything else I sprayed on it later, for some reason, something chemically reacted with that paint and the humidity, and it just covered everything with a really gummy sort of layer. It was very odd. I just didn't like how that worked out. But yeah, this was also kind of a Zen moment, sitting here in the studio and just listening to some music and painting these things. It was actually rather relaxing. It was really, really nice. So you'll notice too, there's two paint jugs up there, a red one and then a goldenrod color one there. So those are apple barrel colors. And when I was trying to figure out what colors I was going to use on here for detailing, a buddy of mine, Chris Seaman, phenomenal fucking illustrator. If you love Magic the Gathering, if you buy anything from Wizards of the Coast, D&D, he's one of their illustrators, if not the illustrator. He also has an incredible, I'll leave a link down below for his stuff, for Cameo Creeps, his horror line of paintings. They're amazing. And everything you see that he illustrates and paints, it's not digital. That's apple barrel, fucking $1 and $2 paint tubes. It blows my mind what the dude can do. He's just a phenomenal guy all the way around. Somebody I definitely look up to. So here's some more parts that I had sprayed up, and then here's the orange going on. This is the Rust-Oleum color that was going on. It was humid as hell this day, and I had already sanded down the hands with, I think, 1,000 grit sandpaper. Yeah, I had wet sanded them down so I could still keep the white on there, because these hands were black, and I was like, all right, I've got to get a base coat that's light enough that when I put the orange on there, it doesn't like turn like a deeper orange. I just wanted it to really stand out, and this is amazing. They look wet. They're not. This is actually dry. Something happened, and they got kind of a semi-gloss coat on it. Now, thinking about it, though, maybe that orange was a semi-gloss, but they've got a higher gloss look on it. And I kept being scared to touch them because I'm like, oh my God, are you still wet? And then here I got a little bit better about how I was doing things. I started, putting supports on them and getting a better overall coverage on them. But this alien red paint was just, I'm not gonna lie, that coat, that thing just coated like hell. It was just bad. Oh, okay, so this is, here's one that's out of sync. So this is the original colors for the hands and the feet. They're black. And I knew that I was like, well, yeah, and here it is. Yeah, this is when I was first spatting them on there. Isn't that like night and day when you look back at the clip from earlier when it's all that red color? That's what that red did. It just like spread everywhere. It was like a disease. It just got on everything. Pretty sure half the cans in my lungs. And it was just, I love that paint normally for anything else, but for this project, just with that weather, it just went nuts on me. I didn't like it. I don't know why I'm admiring this. I really wonder what the original audio was, what was in my brain when I was looking at this. I don't know if I was... No, this wasn't. This was one of the clips where I sent, like an update as to where I was and what was going on, and then also some of the struggles I was having there with like the tape not working, humidity overwhelming me. There was just a lot of things here, and for the majority of them, thank goodness they came out better. But this was definitely one that I went to task on it a couple times, sanded and repainted at least 2 or 3 times. That was not fun. It just was not fun. But that was something I was not happy with until, Rick was happy with it. That's the whole thing. When you're doing any of this stuff, you want the client to be happy. And I get asked that question a lot when I do freelance efforts of any kind, when I do custom toys for people. It always comes down to, which is common sense, right? We all know that. Is the client happy? Is the customer happy with the end result? And you send as many pictures. And I send video. I send all kinds of stuff because I don't want there to be any surprises. And thankfully, whenever I met up with Rick and finally handed everything over, he seemed elated, and everything else like that. So here, I think I took 2 or 3 really weird shots of this stuff laying out drying. It was a little weird seeing all these things lined up with little hands all over it. My mind started to run wild with it. Oh, there's the yellow I picked for the thing, but you can tell on that front one how that one still had a really rough texture on it, but the ones in the back started being much better looking. In hindsight, I probably would have tried testing this out on a few more things, but because I was trying to stay within a budget and everything, I didn't push the boundaries as far as I should have for the technical need for the paint I was applying and all this. I should have done my homework much better. That's a bad on me on that. But still, and I don't mean to downplay or make it seem like it was a bad thing. It wasn't in regards to the project. This was so much fucking fun. It's not even funny. It's still something that it's really crazy because this led to me getting a couple of other freelance opportunities and some people that were like, oh, hey, can you do this? And it was just fucking wonderful when it worked out. So, man, I am lingering on this shot for a long time. I really want to know what 5 year ago me was saying. Oh, here I'm actually applying the hardware back in. This is when I discovered that paint had gotten in on the screw threads. Now, it's plastic, so basically the first time the screws are put in, that's where they set. But I was so freaked out by how thick the paint had gotten on some of them that I'm like, oh God, how am I going to get these screws back in there? Am I going to cause stress fractures? Any other problems with them? The good thing is the plastic is really good quality on these figures. Wasn't a big deal. Here you see that the paint application is much better, has texture to it, but it's much more refined. And I'm also at this point, like, there were certain things, like I found this perfect blue that was part of Apple Barrel colors. I was like, well, that'll work for the small blue triangle that's on the front of them, which is supposed to be the stand-in for the drink dispenser. Yeah, it's so weird looking back at this. Oh, here, like, am I actually going to cut that? Oh, this was the one. Oh my God. Yeah, this is the only clip that survived to me, like, pretending to cut it and it didn't cut. Here it is finished. This was one of the last ones I did. No, this is the first one I did. This was number 1 out of 10. But see, that I know that's wrong because this is not the one I sanded down. Isn't that a trip that I can actually look at and go, nope, that's not the one. I recognize that particular type of overspray down at the bottom. I think that was one of the later ones. So that may have been technically the 9th one that was put together. But when I was putting them together, I wasn't sticking the stickers on there because I was just so paranoid. So the label on the back and the front with Topsy's face went on absolutely last. I was just like, nope. And then, man, what was it? I'm trying to remember now. Yeah, I think I did end up stacking them in order here by which ones got done. So the ones in the back are the earliest ones, and then the big Keymaster one that doesn't have the label on his face is sitting over to the side. This is just wild. This is probably my favorite shot I took. I don't know. It was really nice. It was a really cool feeling to accomplish something and help out ICWXP. It was a hell of a lot of fun. And it's part of the reason why I enjoyed even doing the 3D modeled ones recently, but even those I want to revisit. Let's see. Okay, so the next thing we should have up here, this is the card back. So I've had a few people ask me about this. This was designed to be kind of the front and the back lane next to each other. The original idea when I had done this was I was going to do all the elements laid out in there, and Rick was kind enough to provide me with the logos and stuff that I needed and some bio and information and other things and a lot of photographs. So I took a lot of those elements, put them together, and it was kind of an homage to 90s, 80s sort of things with a clip and save bio in the back and all this other stuff. And let me see here. There'll be a finished one after this next clip that you'll see of the whole thing, and I can explain more there. This next clip we're going to be taking a look at here. This is me working in between Photoshop and Illustrator to build up Topsy. Now, I've got this is kind of a funny thing for me. I knew what the robot looked like, right? I know what Topsy looks like. I've watched the show for quite a while. And yet, when I did my very first design renderings of it, I think it was in an early illustration, I got the stripes wrong. I put red stripes underneath where the eyes were and a white stripe down the center. And I was so fucking embarrassed that I messed that up. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? How would I mess that up? So I ended up in Illustrator. You'll see when it switches over, there's a picture posted in there of Topsy. And that's where I built the original vector graphics, which is what all this is based on. I pull those graphics bit by bit into here. And you'll see me doing that. I'm about to import the screws in right now. And I built everything in there in a vector aspect and then re-render in here, and I'll build up three-dimensional aspects by shading, by drop shadow, all the standards. You know, if you're in Photoshop, you know what you're doing in here. And in it, I'm adding highlights and all these other things. And this kind of led to me doing this work for other stuff, and I got really good at rendering and that this even led to other really good work for me down the road too. So I was happy about that. But I was obsessed with the idea that I was not going to fuck this up again. I was going to get all the details right. I was going to make sure I hammered home on every single thing, to the point to where you notice I'm putting 2 thin white highlights on there. I stared for an ungodly amount of time at Topsy's face, at the details in video, like a stalker. I even counted out the amount of lines that are across his face down there at one point. I like zoomed in on one of the better shots on video, and I was like, no, this has got to look right. The spacing's got to be on point. How many are actually in between where this red stripe is? What is this inner and outer glow on this part of the mouth here? It was fucking psychotic. But I was happy in the end. The sticker came out looking great. The logo worked out really well. This was a lot of fun. I really did enjoy this. So here's the final. This is the entire card. The green area you're seeing around the edge was the bleed that I had, because I think at this point we didn't know if it was going to get professionally printed or not, so I was just working on a bleed in there. But yeah, so the left hand side is the back, and then the right hand side is the front, and then that guideline in the middle would have been basically the score that it would have folded in half with. And my plan had been to build I don't want to say press. It's basically a plastic molder, and I would have been able to seal the figure in there and then create one that would have allowed the card to be slipped out. But there wasn't enough time for me to build one, and then it was just time was running out, and we needed to get this done for the whole thing for everybody that would even want one of these as a reward. So in the end, it was a hell of a lot of fun, and I'm super grateful I did it. It was a fucking blast. Thanks, Rick.